Hello, my name's Ben.
And my name's Josh.
And welcome back to FPL graduates, and welcome back to another video where we're going to be going through your dilemmas ahead of the Game Week 4 deadline and let you know what we think you should do with those dilemmas.
Okay, so yeah, Game Week 3 was a bit of a mad one. Lots of points scored, especially in defence. Some defenders scoring some absolutely crazy totals. But one man that wasn't scoring a crazy total and hasn't done since Game Week 1 is João Pedro. Obviously started Game Week 1, got the penalty, looked good to be fair. But in the last 2 game weeks, he has been benched. Lack of minutes is the big problem. And also Brighton's fixtures don't look very good going forwards. Ben, have you got him in your team? What's your plans with him? Are you planning to replace him this game week?
Yeah, I've not got João Pedro in my... no, sorry, I do have João Pedro. The plan is not to have him by the Game Week 4 deadline. I am looking to sell him on. And I think with a lot of us FPL managers who invested in Brighton assets for the first 3 game weeks of the season, this was always going to be the plan to sell them off ahead of Game Week 4 and that fixture turn. Yes, they've got one good fixture in the middle there with Bournemouth at home, but other than that, it really doesn't look like a great fixture for their attacking assets. So looking at João Pedro and looking to move him on is probably one of the priority sort of points for FPL managers for this upcoming game week.
Yeah, 100%. So in terms of replacements, obviously he's quite hard to move on because he is 5.5 million. So unless you have money in the bank, then you're going to have to find some funds to sort of upgrade that position. There's no one at that price, in my opinion, that really provides just as good value, really. Obviously, Eddie Nketiah's 5.6, but as we've seen, his position is not cemented in that Arsenal team. So here's a couple of guys that we think could be good options going in to Game Week 4 and beyond. So Nicolas Jackson comes up first. Obviously, he got his first goal for Chelsea on Friday night against Luton. Overall, since he started playing for Chelsea, I think he's looked quite lively. 2xG there. Goes to show that he's getting involved with the chances, just maybe not scoring as many as owners would hope for. What was your thoughts on his performance on Friday, Ben? Did you think he's a good asset to go for? Do you think there's better assets in that Chelsea team?
I certainly think there's better assets in that Chelsea team, but because the options are somewhat limited up front, a lot of managers are going to look to go from him. He's probably going to be 7.2 million as well by the deadline. I wasn't too impressed with him in the first half of the fixture, and in Game Week 3, and Chelsea sort of came alive in the second half, and he got his first goal of the season. I do think there are better options in the Chelsea team. Just don't know whether there are that many better options up top than Nicolas Jackson at the moment, especially with the fixtures that he's got. And he looked decent in the second half as well. I think combine those two, and he looks like one of the better options to go for if you're replacing João Pedro.
Yeah, 100%. And then another option, someone who I'm quite keen on maybe bringing into my team personally is YOANE WISSA. Obviously, he did blank in Game Week 3, but he's had a fantastic start to the season in Game Week 1 and 2. Obviously, playing up front for Brentford, 3 goal involvements in those 2 fixtures. And like I said, the blank against Crystal Palace. Some decent fixtures in there for Brentford as well. Bournemouth at home, Everton at home, Forest away, amongst the trips to Newcastle and Manchester United, which I don't think are terrible fixtures for Brentford, because obviously we've seen them implement that different system that they tend to do against the top 6 sides, which tends to work really, really well. Obviously, they beat Man City home and away last season. So this is a team that can do damage to these big sides. Is your thoughts with Wissa, or do you think Mbeumo, similar to the Chelsea situation, maybe with Sterling, Ben? Do you think he's obviously the better pick, but because we've got a lack of forwards, Wissa becomes a good option at 6.2 million?
Yeah, I think that's exactly the case. There's a lot of good midfielders, and I think Mbeumo is probably the better pick. But it is trying to get and fit all those midfielders in. If you're going to have to take sacrifice by not having Mbeumo, I think Wissa is a good option to go for. Just got to be aware, obviously, 6.2 has risen 0.2 since the start of the season. And he is a bit more of a 60-minute man than Mbeumo, so you can expect him to be regularly subbed off sort of in the latter stages of the game. But yeah, the fixtures do look really nice as well for the long term, especially. Brentford's fixtures are really, really good. And I think he's perfect coverage to have if you aren't able to get Mbeumo in your team. So definitely one to consider. And as well, if you've not got too much of a budget to move Pedro on, Wissa looks to be good because you haven't sort of got to pay all that extra million that Jackson may cost compared to Wissa come the Game Week 4 deadline.
Yeah, so we're going to move on now to Arsenal. Obviously, had a bit of a turbulent start to the season. Obviously, won a couple of games and drew at the weekend against Fulham. They're scoring goals, but not maybe as consistent as we thought they maybe would be following on from last season. So we're just going to take a look at a couple of their assets and how well they've been performing so far this season. Obviously, they have a trip to Man United come to them, at the Emirates this week. So a lot of people are a bit conscious that we've seen you know, don't really want players in their team playing each other. But that we're going to talk through why that could be quite a good thing in this little segment. So starting off with Gabriel Martinelli, probably the one that everyone's looking to offload first, I'd say, out of their two probably Arsenal assets that most people have. Started all 3 games so far, played a lot of minutes as well. 244 is quite decent for him. Obviously, only picking up that 1 assist against Nottingham Forest, so he's blanked twice in a row now. The XG, the XA, nothing crazy either. What's your thoughts on him, Ben? Is he a sell right now just to fund those transfers for players that may be playing a little bit better than him, have a better fixture run than him? Or do you think he's worth keeping because these big fixtures Arsenal can perform in?
Yeah, we have seen Arsenal perform really well, and actually Martinelli himself performing these big fixtures last season. He seemed to be the one that in transition finished off all these Arsenal chances last season, and a lot of his returns did come from that. But with how good some of these other midfielders are playing right now, he looks to be a sell at the moment. Obviously, with Gabriel Jesus coming back, that will positively impact Martinelli in terms of his attacking output. But that's not a guarantee that we have set in stone. What the guarantee that we have with all these other midfielders is they're performing right here and right now at the start of the season, whereas Martinelli isn't. So I'd probably be looking to sell him on. The fixtures for Arsenal get a bit tough. Yes, we know he can perform in that, but he hasn't performed to start the season with in any of these really first 3 fixtures, even though he sort of got that 1 assist. The numbers haven't been great. So if I was looking to move any of these Arsenal assets on and you had Martinelli, maybe I'd lean towards him being one of the first ones to sell.
Yeah, 100%. Looking forward, though, Martin Odegaard. Obviously, the penalty situation is a bit unclear still at Arsenal. He took the one against Palace. Saka took the one against Fulham at the weekend. Martin Odegaard, decent XG, to be fair. Obviously, the penalty inflates that. But yeah, what's your thoughts on Odegaard? Do you think he is the second best attacker, or do you think Martinelli still trumps him in that regard?
I think he's probably on the same level as Martinelli. If not, I think Martinelli maybe trumps him a little bit more just because of the price tag. He's 0.5 more, and you've basically got the same amount of returns for the first 3 fixtures of the season. I would be looking sort of at a similar sort of way as I did with Martinelli. I think there's definitely a case here to sell Odegaard. You got the 1 goal and the 11 points, I think it was, against Palace, but that was off a penalty that, you know, we've seen this week. He's not taken this week's penalty, so we really don't know whether he's going to be on the penalties going forward, which could have been a key thing for him and made him sort of at least a bit more valued at 8.5 million. But again, probably one that I'd be looking to sell in this situation. The tough fixtures may result in Odegaard sort of playing a bit more of a reserved role in the Arsenal team. But yeah, again, it is a really tough one. I think it's got to be a sell here.
Yeah, and then on to the final one. Bukayo Saka, he's risen up to 8.7 million at the time of recording. So people can sell him for 0.1 million of a profit if they wanted to. 66.6% owned. A very, very high owned asset here. Obviously scored 2 goals now, 1 from open play, 1 from the penalty spot. For me, I personally wouldn't sell him. Ben, are you on the same sort of lines? He sort of differentiates himself to those other 2 Arsenal attackers, doesn't he?
Yeah, he sort of sets himself apart because it's the high ownership combined with penalty taken and the stats as well. They look pretty decent for Bukayo Saka. So I do think he is a hold for now. Obviously, if you wanted to bank the money and maybe rely on him dropping in price over the next few weeks, then by all means. But I think you could get punished by doing that. We've seen Saka perform in big games before. And he's sort of almost as a talismanic figure for Arsenal. And for the price that you're paying for him, 8.5 million at the start of the season, for someone talismanic in a title challenger is actually really, really good value. And, you know, you could expect a similar sort of player like Salah maybe from Liverpool, and look at how much more expensive he is. So if you look at it within the context of that, I think it's definitely one where you go, look, it's worth keeping Bukayo Saka in the situation.
Yeah, definitely agree with that one. So moving on, we're going to look at another Arsenal player that hasn't actually started a fixture yet so far. Me and you sold him last week at the deadline. Gabriel, obviously no starts in his first 3 fixtures. He was subbed on in the first 2, wasn't subbed on at the weekend. Surprisingly so, because a lot of people, obviously, there was no Timber, he was injured. Tomiyasu was suspended. It was like a cert that Gabriel came into the team. Still didn't start. Jakub Kiera, or however you pronounce his name, started ahead of Gabriel, which sort of goes to show, I think, Arteta's thinking behind Gabriel. I know he's come out and said that he's very important. He's staying. He's not going Saudi. But if he's literally choosing every other centre-half in front of him, I think it speaks volumes. Only played the 24 minutes. What's your thoughts on him so far this season, Ben? If people still have him now, he's surely on 100% sell, isn't he?
Yeah, 100% sell here. No doubt about it. For even like with the price drop, I'd just get rid. He's clearly not in Arteta's plans for whatever reason this season. Something must happen behind the scenes. But combine that with the tough fixtures going forwards, I don't know whether Arteta doesn't trust him or what. But you got to be looking at selling him out.
Yeah, 100%. And then a couple of replacements. One that's performed unbelievable on Friday night, getting those 2 assists as well as a clean sheet, is Malo Gusto at 4.1 million. So saves you 0.8 million doing this switch at the time of recording. Chelsea's fixtures, as we know, are really, really good going forwards for the next 5. I thought they were quite defensively solid against Luton. Obviously, Luton not really going to test them. Some of these teams in this run probably will test them a little bit more. What's your thoughts on him, Ben? Do you think he maybe overperformed on that Friday night? We're not going to expect that sort of attacking output from him going forward, right?
Yeah, I wouldn't expect that from him week in, week out. Obviously, one of the assists was like sort of, I wouldn't say a lucky one, but he just happened to be the player that passed it. It wasn't like him creating that goal. So, yeah, I wouldn't expect that every week. And I expect Gusto to probably be at 0.2. He'd probably go up 0.2 in value from Friday night. But you just also got to be aware, if you're going to look at getting Malo Gusto, it could block you from getting one of Jackson or Sterling if you've already got Ben Chilwell, which a lot of managers do. So it's worth bearing that in mind. And this is a short-term fix as well for Malo Gusto. We know Reece James is back in a matter of weeks. It could be just after the international break. So that gives you sort of 1 or maybe 2 game weeks of Malo Gusto before you're probably looking at benching him or selling him. So it's definitely one to bear in mind. It's a short-term fix, not sort of anything that would mean you're sorted for a £4 million defender for the rest of the season.
Yeah, definitely agree with that. And then we're going to speak about Newcastle defence as well. Obviously, they've had a tough start to the season facing Liverpool, City and Aston Villa in their first 3 games. So I think defensively, we can maybe ignore their data so far, given the fact they've faced 3 of the best attacking sides in the league. But going forwards, their fixture run is really good. And we're looking at Kieran Trippier here. Obviously, he had the price hike this season to 6.5 million. Was super offensive for them last season. Amongst these fixtures you're looking on screen here, we will see Newcastle participate in the Champions League as well midweek. Do you think his minutes could be affected this season, Ben, due to Champions League, or do you think that he will play pretty much every game for Newcastle?
I think he should play every game in the league for Newcastle, to be honest. He's their captain. He's been really influential in this Newcastle team. And I think if you take him out, he would severely impact the level that this Newcastle team could go to. And if you take the City game out and look at those 2 other fixtures in isolation, the expected goal involvement per 90 was actually really good for Kieran Trippier. Still, like his expected goal involvement per 90 was around 0.35 last season, and it's around about 0.3 this season if you take out the City game, obviously. So yeah, I think it's his stats are saying that, you know, he's still really good. He's still producing a lot of chances. Yes, when Newcastle were keeping the clean sheet against Liverpool, he wasn't in the bonus, but you know, I think over the next few games that get easier and easier for Newcastle, Trippier's influence will grow more and more as they're given more attacking freedom. So I think at 6.5 million come sort of game week 6, I think he's going to be owned by quite a lot of managers, especially with a lot selling off Salah and having a lot of money in the bank. Like, the money isn't an issue this season. So I do see a lot of managers going towards Trippier in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, 100% agree with that. And if you do need to save a bit of cash, obviously Sven Botman is the cheapest, alongside Dan Burn, cheapest £4.5 million defender. He obviously picked up that knock at the weekend. Obviously, we don't know the full extent of it now, but from what we've heard so far is that it's not as bad as first feared. So potentially a week or 2. Obviously, there's an international break between game week 4 and game week 5 anyway. So that gives him an extra week to recover if he isn't called up for the Dutch national team. Obviously, 18% owned. I personally have him in my team. Brought him in last week with the idea of benching him for game week 4 and 5 to play a Doji ahead of him. What's your thoughts on him, Ben? Obviously, he's got that one goal involvement so far. I don't think that's what he's there for necessarily in terms of FPL points. I think you're looking for clean sheets. But yeah, what's your thoughts? Do you think the £2 million savings worth it with Trippier? But obviously, like you said, money's not an issue right now, right?
Yeah, I think if we were a lot tighter on money, and in pre-season we were all sort of a lot more in the camp that Botman would be better value, but a lot of managers are probably going to have the 1 or even 2 million in the bank spare to be able to splash out on a Kieran Trippier. So I think, you know, Botman is good value. Maybe Trippier is better in terms of the attacking returns, but I do see Newcastle keeping clean sheets, and Botman does pick up bonus when Newcastle keep clean sheets as well. So I don't see any reason why you wouldn't consider him for your team, especially if you're looking at your budget options in defence, your 4.5 millions, and you've sort of allocated the funds that you maybe would have spent on Trippier elsewhere. I think Botman is a great alternative. That's of course if he's fit going forwards. You're probably looking at after the international break anyway to get him in. So, you know, by then he could be absolutely fine.
Yeah, it's definitely a hold for now in terms if you're thinking about bringing him in. I wouldn't bring him just yet until we know that he is all clear to go. So moving on now, Brighton as well, another team who sort of go through a bit of a poorer run. We obviously touched on it with João Pedro earlier on. PERVIS Estupinan, the first one to bring up, obviously had a cracking start to the season, 3 goal involvements already going forward. One of the things that probably screams out to me, though, is their XGA, 6.84 conceded so far this season in 3 fixtures where they faced 3 pretty poor attacking sides, Luton, Wolves and West Ham in those 3 games. They then go on to face Newcastle and Man United in the next 2 especially. What's your thoughts with Estupinan? Do you think the attacking threat is worth it to sort of counteract this poor defensive start to the season that we've seen from Brighton?
At the moment, it's going to have to be for a lot of managers, because I don't think this is a priority transfer out necessarily. He's produced some decent returns, and I think with his attacking sort of output that he has right now, I don't think he's in the position where managers should be selling him. I think he's at the moment unsellable just because of that. But yeah, like you said, the stats don't lie, and Brighton certainly haven't looked nearly as good defensively as they did last season. Obviously, they've lost a few players. The effect of Caicedo and McAllister in midfield has an impact on that. But I also think sort of the last game against West Ham, De Zerbi got the tactics wrong on that. And I think Brighton are a team that will improve over games with De Zerbi, and I think their defence will improve as a result. But the next 2 certainly, you could make a case to maybe even bench Estupinan if you see fit. A lot of managers have a very strong team in game week 4. And, you know, if you're not guaranteed a clean sheet, there's always a possibility of benching him.
Yeah, 100%. And another player that is really high owned as well for Brighton is obviously Mitoma. Again, had a really good start to the season. Maybe just about overperforming that data a little bit, but it's something that we see with really good players, that they tend to overperform their expected data. Obviously, you're an owner of Mitoma, Ben. What's your thoughts on him? Do you think he's sort of one of those ones that is almost fixture-proof because Brighton are so good going forward compared to how they are defensively, right?
Yeah, they are really good going forward, and they're really attacking. But I'm also sort of split in 2 minds because the fixtures aren't great at all for Brighton. And you could pick up someone probably just as consistent for a similar price with great fixtures. You're looking at your Mbeuemos, you're looking for your Sterlings that are performing really, really well at the moment. I think Mitoma sort of start the season average is the word that comes to mind, but he's still getting returns, and he's there's been a blank in there, but he is producing returns. He is looking dangerous going forwards, and I think with Brighton, they are relying on Mitoma performing for them. So I'm split in 2 minds about it, whether I'd sell him or not. But you know, we'll have to wait and see. Brighton are so attacking that they could feasibly score in their next sort of 5 fixtures against Newcastle, against Man United, and against Liverpool. That's entirely a possibility.
Okay, so that wraps up our deadline dilemmas so far. If you've got any more or any questions, leave them in the comments down below, and we'll reply to you as soon as we can with hopefully some helpful advice.
Yeah, and as always, please remember to like, comment, and subscribe. And as usual, I've been Ben.
I've been Josh.
And we'll see you guys
later. Have a good game week, everyone.